A millionaire marries a cleaning lady to get revenge on his ex on their wedding night. He is shocked to realize the black Bugatti Noir glided through the bustling streets of Beverly Hills in Los Angeles, exuding the kind of elegance reserved for a symbol of power. Its polished exterior reflected the golden glow of lights from upscale boutiques and luxury five-star hotels lining Thessady's most exclusive avenue. Behind the wheel sat Adrian Blackwell, motionless and commanding. His eyes remained fixed on the road, a mirror of his unyielding control. Impeccably dressed, his composed exterior contrasted sharply with the introspection brewing within him. 40 years old, he thought, his fingers rhythmically tapping on the leather steering wheel. How did 40 come so quickly? It feels like just yesterday. I was 20. Sure, I've built an empire. My fashion consortium is the largest in California. But what about me? What have I truly achieved? A sigh slipped from his lips, his voice barely above a whisper, as he tried to quiet his inner doubts. At least in a week, I'll marry Victoria Montgomery, the most beautiful woman in the world, my muse. She's nature's masterpiece, my exclusive beauty, my territory. He mused, a possessive pride flickering in his thoughts. And only mine. Every man envies me. He allowed himself a smile tinged with disbelief. Sometimes I think the universalins her to me like an impossible prize I've somehow won. Suddenly Ethan slammed on the brakes. His breath caught his chest tightening as he stared at a scene that rendered him speechless. This can't be, he muttered, his voice cracking under the weight of shock. In front of the hotel, under a gleaming awning, a stunning woman in a designer red dress embraced another man passionately. Her graceful movements, her flawless hair, it was unmistakable. Cassandra Vale echoed out, disbelief thick in his voice. A pang of betrayal surged through him. Those who shatter trust don't break others, they fracture themselves. The soul carries its scars like indelible marks. The scene before him hit like a punch. Tough gut. His fiancée, his so-called exclusive treasure, was in another man's arms. Dante Ricci, dressed impeccably, slid his hands around her waist with an intimacy that Ethan couldn't bear. His jaw tightened, a nervous tick surfacing. As his mind raced to make sense of it, he slowed the car and parked the curb, unable to tear his gaze from the pier. So this is her true face, my perfect fiancée, my untouchable jewel. A fraud. She won't be the one to humiliate me, thought, fury simmering beneath the surface. For a moment, he closed his eyes, forcing himself to take deep, measured breaths. When he opened them, his expression had changed. A cold determination replaced the initial shock, and in his eyes glinted something far more dangerous. This isn't over, Victoria. If you think you can play games with me, then you'd know. Adrian Blackwell, he mutters coldly to himself. Ethan floors the gas pedal, Hisker, disappearing down the avenue. Behind him, the hotel lights grow faint, but deep within, a new determination has been planted in his heart. Betrayal is a dagger that always finds its way back to the one who throws it, even if silently. Murmurs. The Bugatti Noir glides smoothly toward the towering skyscraper housing the most exclusive fashion conglomerate in the region. Adrian Blackwell steps out of the car, his movements purposeful, yet his chiseled features betray a stormy mood that not even his impeccable demeanor can mask. Inside the grand lobby, the receptionist, Maya Cheng, greets him with a bright smile. Good morning, Mr. Blackwell. He doesn't acknowledge her and strides past without a word. His mind is a whirlwind too. Preoccupied, Tovin register her words inside the elevator. He stares blankly into the distance, the soft hum off the machinery lulling him into a trance as it whisks into his penthouse office. Exiting, he passes his Olivia Barnes, who greets him with her usual professionalism. Good morning, Mr. Blackwell, doesn't acknowledge her, and strides past without a word. His mind is a whirlwind, too preoccupied to even register her words inside the elevator. He stares blankly into the distance, the soft hum of the machinery lulling him into a trance as it whisks him to his penthouse office. Exiting, he passes his Olivia Barnes, who greets him with her usual professional, "Isam, good morning, sir, do ya need anything?" His lips barely move in response, a gesture so faint it's almost imperceptible as he marches on, avoiding her gaze entirely in his office. Ethan slams the door shut behind him, the luxurious space filled with designer furniture, and offering a panoramic view of the city skyline feels suffocating in its insolence. A sudden wave of anger overtakes him, and he slams his fist against the marble desk. This isn't going to end here, I swear it. The echo of his voice fades into the stillness, only to be interrupted by a faint noise coming from the private bathroom. His head snaps toward the sound. Who's there? He demands, his voice sharp with irritation and suspicion. From the bathroom, a young woman emerges hesitantly, her modest demeanor and the yellow cleaning gloves on her hands reveal her role, and she clutches a bottle of disinfectant spray. Nervously she avoids his gaze, her voice trembling as she speaks. It's just me, sir, the new cleaning staff. Ethan cuts her off sharply before she can finish. I didn't ask for your name. His face hardens and his tone becomes even colder. From now on you'll clean only when I tell you to. I don't want you invading my privacy. If you're done, leave. The woman nods quickly, her head bowing lower as she pushes her cleaning cart toward the door. She moves quietly, careful not to make a sound. Sometimes the world feels like it's flipped upside down, a reminder that the summit isn't always glorious and the ground isn't always a fall from grace. As door clicks shut, Ethan is left alone once more. The rage that consumed him moments ago shifts to a bitter introspection. He leans against the desk, his jaw clenched tightly. Cassandra Vale, he says aloud, his voice seething with controlled fury. You'll pay for the humiliation you've caused me. He paces the office deliberately, his steps echoing in the stillness. His gaze fixes in the massive window overlooking the bustling city far below. Life moves on, indifferent to his inner term. Oh, I have to think of something, he mutters under his breath, dark thoughts weaving through his mind. Revenge is like a fire that promises to warm your hands, yet it always ends up burning the heart that feeds it. By mid-morning, Ethan strides out of his office with a determined pace. His expression is tense, but his upright posture exudes authority. Command and grasped as he heads toward the conference room. The day has barely begun yet. The simmering anger inside him fuels his every step. Reaching the elevator, he presses the button to descend. On the way down, the elevator halts at a middle floor. The doors slide open with a soft mechanical hum, revealing her once again, the cleaning lady. Leela Hart pushes her cart with her head lowered as she lifts her gazebo. Step inside, she finds herself face to face with the owner of the company. Her eyes widen and the color drains from her face. For a moment, she appears frozen, as though she has forgotten how to move. Ethan frowns, scrutinizing her with a stern look before breaking the silence. Lucky me, it seems I'm the grand prize in a raffle. You've won every ticket for the woman barely manages to react. I'm sorry, she whispers, her voice trembling as she lowers her head and motions to back away with the cart, visibly irritated. Ethan sighs with impatience. Fine, just get in quickly. Obediently, she maneuvers Thackard into the elevator, retreating to a corner to take up as little space as possible. Thank you, she murmurs timidly. Ethan doesn't respond. The air between them grows thick with discomfort as the elevator doors close and the descent resumes. The proud often mask vulnerability by standing taller, while the humble no true greatness requires no height. Suddenly a strange buzzing interrupts the journey. The elevator lights flicker before the entire system shuts down. With a jarring thud, the cabin comes to a sudden halt. Trapped between floors, silence engulfs the space. Only the woman's uneven breathing breaks the stillness. Ethan, annoyed, repeatedly presses the emergency button when chance knocks cause Latiflos. Close behind, holding lessons for the soul, the elevator remains stuck, suspended in place. The dim glow of the emergency lights cast the cabin in a dull haze, and the quiet hum of the dead electrical system echoes faintly. Ethan continues pressing the emergency button forcefully, as if sheer willpower might fix the problem. This is ridiculous. What kind of company am I running? If we can't keep a damn elevator functioning. In her corner, Grace watches him cautiously, saying nothing though. She's also uneasy. Her calm demeanor contrasts sharply with the millionaire's growing frustration. Suddenly, Ethan stops jabbing the button and steps back. His usually composed, commanding face twists into an expression of distress. The crisp collar of his shirt seems suffocating, and he brings his hands to his neck as though loosening an invisible noose. No, this can't be happening. he murmurs, his voice shaky as his breathing becomes labored. Grace looks at him, startled. Are you all right, sir? Ethan doesn't answer, leaning against the elevator wall. He shuts his eyes tightly as if trying to escape the confines of the space. His lips begin to tremble, too closed and too small. He mutters. Grace hesitates before stepping forward. The initial fear in his eyes was replaced by an unusual calm. He moved closer, leaving the cleaning cart behind. Sir, you need to breathe with me. Can you hear me? Sheest no response. I can't. No, Ethan murmured, his voice barely audible. With an unexpected steadiness, Grace positioned herself in front of him, careful not to invade his space. Listen to me. Look at my hands, she said, raising both hands slowly. Palms open and steady. Breath with me. Inhale, exhale slowly. Ethan opened his eyes slightly, panic still flickering in his gaze, yet something in Grace's calm voice seemed to ground him. Inhale, exhale. That's it. Slowly she repeated, her eyes locked on his. Her tone was soft, firm, the kind of voice one might use to talk someone away from a ledge. With effort, Ethan began to follow her lead. His breathing, though uneven, started to match her rhythm. That's it. Slowly she encouraged. Now think of something outside this place. Imagine the ocean, the sound of the waves, the open air. Grace continued. Ethan closed his eyes again, this time with a touch more control. His rigid hands eased from his chest, and the tension in his shoulders began to melt. The ocean, he whispered, his voice trembling slightly. Yes, the ocean. Grace responded with a gentle smile. Her tone carried a maternal warmth. It's vast, full of freedom. No walls, no ceilings, just a horizon. A moment of silence settled between them, broken only by Ethan's now steadier breaths. When he finally opened his eyes, he looked at her with disbelief. How did you do that? He asked. Grace lowered her hands with quiet composure. It's not magic, sir. I just reminded you of something you already knew. Fear traps us far more than any elevator ever could. Ethan stared at her, bewildered. Something inside him shifted. The humility and wisdom of this woman stood in stark contrast to the arrogance they often projected. How did you learn to do that? He asked, his voice now softer, almost curious. Grace held his gaze for a moment before replying with calm certainty. Life can trap you in space smaller than this. If you don't learn to breathe, you lose yourself in them. The elevator trembled slightly, and the lights flickered. Finally the system restarted, and the cabin resumed its ascent. Grace stepped back, returning to her corner in silence. Ethan straightened his posture, adjusting his jacket, but his thoughts were far from his usual composed demeanor. As the doors opened and faraway light poured in, one thing was clear. This woman had just taught him Allison. No one in his world of power and prestige ever called the most invaluable. Help often comes wrapped in simplicity, the kind our egos refuse to acknowledge. Ethan stepped out of the elevator, but for the first time in a long while the ground beneath his feet felt unsteady. Turning to glance back at Grace, he saw her standing there, quietly pushing the cleaning cart with the same humility she had entered with. Something stopped him for a fleeting second. He felt the urge to thank her, but his pride swallowed the words instead. He adjusted his jacket again and strode toward the conference room. Grace, noticing his silence, let out a barely audible sigh and lingered for a moment before pushing her cart down the hall. Inside the boardroom, a striking glass table dominated the space, surrounded by the consortium's top shareholders. Ethan entered with deliberate steps, concealing any trace of the anger and betrayal that had plagued him that morning. Among those seated was Cassandra Vale, her radiant smile and confident demeanor impossible to ignore. Her audacity hit Ethan like an invisible dagger, but his face remained stoic. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for your punctuality and for waiting despite the unexpected elevator malfunction, he said as he positioned himself at the head of the table, exuding authority. Today, we'll present a strategy that will place us at the pinnacle of the fashion industry. He paused, letting his gaze sweep across the room before landing briefly on Victoria. She nodded with faint enthusiasm, her expression polished, but insincere anger simmered beneath Ethan's exterior, but he channeled it into shakal control. We've made the bold decision to fully enter the Asian market, focusing on expanding our luxury fashion line to key cities like Shanghai and Tokyo. These cities are not only cultural hubs but also represent a sophisticated youth market eager for exclusivity. A shareholder raises a hand. How do we plan to fund this expansion? Will it come from the recent capitalization? That's correct, Ethan replies confidently. Additionally, we'll be launching a limited edition of custom-made garments designed to resonate with local cultural roots. This move won't just attract an elite clientele but will also solidify our brand as a global icon of sophistication. Victoria, poised as always, raises her hand slightly to join the discussion. That's a brilliant move, Ethan. In a week when we celebrate our wedding, our partnership won't just be personal, it'll be strategic. This union will mark the beginning of an empire that's more inclusive, innovative, and powerful. Therum bursts into applause. Investors nod in approval, clearly impressed by the presentation and the seamless partnership between the couple. A few minutes later, shareholders to file out of the room, visibly satisfied. Victoria waits until everyone has left before approaching Ethan with her usual grace. My love, you were outstanding in your presentation. The investors were thoroughly impressed, she says, wrapping him in an embrace and placing a soft kiss on his cheek. Ethan responds with a faint ironic smile. I'm impressed too, but beneath his composed exterior, his mind races. This won't go unanswered. He thinks I'll make sure you pay for this with the same elegance you used to deceive me. As he hugs him, a cold smile begins to form on his face. Suddenly a brilliant yet cruel idea strikes him like lightning. Got it, he thinks. I'll hit you where it hurts the most, and when you least expect it. With a calculated yet casual tone, Ethan says, my love, how about dinner tonight at the best restaurant in town? Victoria beams. What a wonderful idea, darling. I'll wear that French dress. It looks divine on me. It'll be the envy of every man there tonight, she says with a playful laugh. As they leave the conference room, she rests her hand on his arm, convinced she's in full control. Ethan, however, has only one thought running through his mind. The game has just begun. Those who sow vengeance reap thorns, for hatred never grows without first wounding the soul that harbors it. Workday at the consortium is over. The hallways are nearly empty, and the dimmed lights signal the end of office hours. In a small maintenance room, Leela Hart is meticulously arranging cleaning supplies on the shelves. She's almost ready to change out of her uniform and head home. Suddenly, the sound of a lock turning breaks the silence. The door opens, and Grace hears footsteps behind her. She turns around slowly, and when she sees who it is, her shock is immediate and overwhelming. Adrian Blackwell, the owner of the consortium, is standing there staring at her with an unreadable expression. Good evening, sir. Is there something I can help you with? Grace asked nervously but politely. Ethan entered the room calmly, though his gaze carried a calculating edge. He took another step closer, never breaking eye contact. Actually, yes, you can, he replied curtly. Grace lowered her eyes, feeling the weight of his presence, but managed to timidly ask, please tell me what you need. Ethan crossed his arms, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. I need you to come with me to dinner at a restaurant. Grace's confusion was evident. Her face showed disbelief as she asked, I don't understand, sir. Are you asking me to provide some kind of service there? If that's the case, I'd be happy to. Did I say anything about providing a service? Ethan interrupted, his brows furrowing. Do I need to schedule you a hearing test? Listen carefully to what I'm saying. You're coming with me to dinner at a restaurant. His domineering tone left an awkward silence hanging in the air. Taking a deep breath, Grace raised her eyes with calm determination. Though her hands trembled slightly, she spoke with quiet humility but firm conviction. I understand, sir, that you might underestimate me because of how I look or my position in your company, or used to being surrounded by polished, beautiful people, perfect like your fiancé perhaps. That's why you treat me with such disdain. But appearances can be deceiving, and the privileges that come with status are nothing but illusions. Truth, on the other hand, lies in what's invisible and eternal, far from the heights pride tries to build. She paused briefly, then added with a hint of a smile, or to put it more simply, don't judge a book by its cover. Ethan stood silent, staring at her for a moment. Something in his expression faltered, Booth's pride quickly restored it, still processing. Grace's words helped at her with a mix of challenge and irritation. His tone remained cold though he tried to stay in control. "What's your name, Lila Harton? I suppose after what I just said I'll be fired," she replied, cried calmly, but firmly, even as her trembling hands gave her away. Ethan raised an eyebrow, his smirk more mocking than impressive. "That only do you have trouble hearing, but now you're deciding your own fate at this company." Grace, embarrassed, struggled to respond. "I only meant to," she began, but Ethan cut her off sharply. "There'll be a taxi waiting for you outside in 10 minutes. It'll take you to the restaurant." Grace looked up bewildered. "But sir, I need to change first," she said cautiously. Ethan turned toward the door, glancing over his shoulder with a hint of disdain. "Lila Hart, do not defy my orders. You'll go as you are in your cleaning uniform." With no other choice, Grace nodded, slowly lowering her gaze, as Ethan left the room with the same arrogance with which he had entered. Revenge always comes full circle, but not around its intended target. Instead it ends arrest the one who wields it. The night had settled over the city, and the cool Chicago air wrapped the streets in an almost ironic calm. A white taxi idled outside the company, building its engine, humming as Lila Hart approached with slow, hesitant steps. She was still dressed in her cleaning uniform, just as Ethan had ordered. Her eyes were cast downward, but her mind was racing when she opened the taxi door. The driver gave her a curious look, as though wondering what someone dressed like her was doing, heading to the most exclusive restaurant in town. Without a word, Grace climbed into the vehicle, and the car began its journey to the destination. Ethan had coasted. The ride was quiet, broken only by the soft hum of the engine. Grace clasped her hands tightly in her lap, trying to suppress the unease and confusion brought on by the billionaire's unexpected command. What is he aiming for with this? Wondered perhaps it was an attempt to humiliate her, a twisted game to feed his ego, or maybe there was something deeper at play. Something she hadn't yet figured out. As they arrived at the upscale restaurant, the warm lighting and subdued hum of conversation clashed starkly with the turmoil within. Grace at the entrance. Ethan waited, his pristine suit perfectly tailored. His posture was confident to suiting authority, yet there was something unspoken in his eyes, a flicker of emotion. Even he might not fully understand. Those who weave the perfect web to trap their enemies often forget they can become ensnared themselves. Stepping out of the cab, Grace's uncertain footsteps seemed louder than they were echoing in her own mind. Ethan looked her up and down, scrutinizing her like an unfinished piece of art. His expression remained compassed, though the faint curve of his lips hinted at a smile that never fully formed. "Right on time," he remarked, his tone steady. Without further ado, he extended his arm, gesturing for her to follow him inside. Their entrance did not go unnoticed. Diners turned their heads, whispers rippling across the room. Unlight a hush as the pair passed by. Ethan moved with the poise of someone who commanded attention effortlessly. Meanwhile, Grace struggled to maintain her composure under the weight of so many prying eyes dissecting every detail of her modest appearance. "I hope this evening leaves a lasting impression, Lila Hart," Ethan said as they approached the restaurant's private dining area. "More memorable than you might expect. Those who think they pull the strings of another's soul often forget how easily they can get tangled in their own schemes." Adrian Blackwell led the way with the assuredness of someone in total control, while Grace trailed behind her tentative steps, a stark contrast to his. When they reached the reserved table, a woman with an air of elegance sat with her back to them, her hair immaculately styled. Ethan walked around the table, with Grace following closely behind. As they came face to face, Grace instantly recognized the woman. It was Cassandra Vale, Ethan's fiancée and one of the principal partners in his business empire. "Leave a sign that you're listening to our work with a lovely comment. Leave the name of your hometown famous specialty dish, and we'll guess where you're from." Enthralled, a knot formed in Grace's stomach. She couldn't make sense of what was unfolding before her. Her eyes betrayed her confusion, reflecting the surreal nature of the scene. Ethan, however, wore a faintly sardonic smile, barely perceptible but deliberate. Victoria slowly turned her head, her eyes sweeping over Grace from head to toe, without an ounce of subtlety, her lips curled into a sneer of disgust and disdain. Ethan broke the tense silence with a compliment and a counterfeit smile cutting through Victoria's evident discomfort. "My dear, tonight you are the very embodiment of a goddess," he said, his voice dripping with admiration. "You're so stunning that any other woman would pale in comparison to your presence." "Thank you, darling," Victoria responded triumphantly. "In just a week, you'll be the luckiest man alive when I become your wife at the altar, and everyone will envy you for having me by your side." The most desired and flawless beauty, Grace felt as though the ground beneath her feet was giving way. "Why I'm here in the middle of this, a woman flaunting her unmatched beauty and her charming fiance. What do they have to do with me if they're about to get married? Why did Mr. Ethan bring me here? What does he want from me?" Ethan gestured for Grace to sit and courteously pulled out a chair for her, but before she could take her seat, Victoria interjected, her tone sharp and commanding. "Wait a moment, darling. What is this housemaid doing here? Is she joining us?" "Yes, that's right," Ethan replied calmly. "I don't get it," Victoria said, frowning. "Are you planning to pay for her meal?" "Oh, I see. She came dressed like that to work off her meal by mopping the restaurant floor after we leave," Victoria laughed mockingly. Grace lowered her gaze, the glimmer of a tear threatening to escape her eye before Grace could respond. Ethan stepped in. "What are you worried about, dear? She could never outshine you. You're breathtakingly gorgeous, and that designer dress looks absolutely stunning on your exquisite FRV." Victoria laughed, lightly smoothing out a fold in her dress. "That's not even up for debate, love. She could never measure up to the perfection of my body. Even with all my high-end makeup, professional haircuts, sophisticated furs, and exclusive outfits, it wouldn't even come close to the whirlwind of my charm." Grace remained silent, her grip tightening on the back of the chair, still keeping her eyes fixed on Grace. Victoria pressed, her tone insistent. "Just out of curiosity, why did you invite her here? Someone like her will never step foot in a place like this. And look at how she's dressed, it's embarrassing." Ethan let out a small chuckle. "My love, the contrast between hair and you only makes your beauty shine even brighter. It highlights your elegance," he added. Victoria raised her eyebrows. "You still haven't answered my question," she said pointedly, leaning slightly closer to her. Ethan replied with a mysterious tone, "You'll find out by the end of dinner. I promise." Up until this point, Grace had stayed completely silent, but now she raised her head, her gaze firm and steady, her eyes burned with a mix of courage and dignity. She smoothed her uniform with her fingers, took a deep breath, and spoke. "Are you finished talking about me? Because I'm an adult, and I can speak for myself." Ethan and Victoria exchanged surprised glances, taken aback by Grace's unexpected boldness, but they said nothing. Grace kept her gaze locked on Victoria. "First of all, I have a name, and I'm proud of it. My name is Lila Hart. Address me by it." "Second," she continued, "I'm not here by choice. Mr. Ethan caught me at the end of my shift and asked me to accompany him to this dinner." She paused, straightened at her back, and added sharply, "Third, I'm still wearing my uniform because that was his explicit instruction." Taking another deep breath, she added, her tone cutting even deeper. "Fourth, Miss Victoria, it seems you might have a bit of an issue with self-esteem. You're always pointing out the contrast between your beauty and my less polished appearance. Maybe you're right about our genetic differences, but let me tell you something. I don't envy your DNA. All you seem to have is an air of arrogance, carefully hidden behind layers of makeup and a touch of cosmetic tweaks as the fashion magazines like to hint at." She paused briefly, her voice now steady and resolute, and continued, "But that's your problem, not mine. I'm happy with how I look, and I'm grateful to nature for giving me the privilege of being born, the privilege of life." She reminded them teaches us that while we don't choose where we start, we can always decide the direction we take. The millionaire lowered his head slightly, a flicker of something resembling regret or introspection crossing his face. His voice, though firm, softened as he spoke. "I apologize. All Grace, please have a seat." Turning to Victoria with a gaze that allowed no argument, he added, "Grace is my guest of honor tonight. Victoria, treat her with respect in due time. I'll explain why she's here. For now, let's enjoy the dinner." The meal unfolded in an uneasy silence. punctuated only by the faint clinking of silverware and the muffled hum of conversation. From the restaurant, the three exchanged enigmatic glance pieces of a puzzle that had yet to come together. The millionaire eventually raised his glass, his calculated smile radiating a quiet sense of victory. His eyes scanned the table before he spoke, letting tension linger in the air. "Let's toast. I have an important announcemento make." Victoria, glowing with confidence, raised her crystal glass, flashing a radiant smile to our upcoming wedding. "Surely," she said. Ethan smiled faintly, and shook his head. "Not exactly, but it does relate to a wedding." Victoria's brow furrowed, puzzled. "I don't understand, darling." He met her gaze, Histon, now cold and deliberate. "You will soon enough." Ethan stood from the table with the poise of an actor stepping into the spotlight for his final act. He strode confidently to the small stega in the restaurant, where a microphone awaited taking it. His deep composite voice filled the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. It's an honor to share this special moment with you." The diner's attention was immediately captured at their table. Victoria smiled smugly, certain she was the center of attention this evening. Ethan continued, "I have an announcement to make. See that beautiful woman at the table where I was sitting a moment ago? I'll be marrying her in a week." He paused, subtly gesturing toward the table where Grace and Victoria sat. Victoria made a move to rise, clearly assuming he meant her. But Ethan went on, "Please, a round of applause for my future wife, Lila Hart, the cleaning staff at me company." The restaurant fell into stunned silence for a few moments, began to ripple across the room. Victoria's face froze in disbelief, unable to process what she'd just heard. Grace, equally shocked, sat paralyzed. Ethan carefully set down the microphone and walked back toward the table, his expression calm and reassuring. When he reached Grace, he extended his hand. "Come with me." Lila hesitated warmly, as though the chaos he had unleashed didn't exist. Grace shook her head slightly in refusal, but he persisted, his tone gentle yet insistent. "Please." He took her hand and helped her to her feet. The murmurs grew louder as he led her to the stage. Victoria, visibly furious, slammed her hands on the table and stood up abruptly. "What is this? Ethan, is this some kind of joke? This has to be a prank." Ethan picked up the microphone again, this time holding Grace's hand firmly. He gazed at her with genuine tenderness before turning to Victoria. "The inner beauty of this woman far exceeds yours. Her authenticity eclipses your superficiality." Victoria's fury escalated, yet then maintained his composure. "Her beauty is simply different, unique in its own way. While yours may fade with time, hers will remain untouched because it's rooted in her soul." The restaurant erupted in murmurs and gasps. "Oh, astonishment!" Grace, her eyes brimming with tears and her heart racing, whispered shakily, "What are you doing, sir?" Leaning in closer, Ethan softly whispered in her ear, "Please just go along with this. I promise I'll explain everything before." Grace could respond. Helen then even further, and with unexpected gentleness kissed her lightly on the lips. It was a fleeting gesture, almost ethereal, yet it carried a profound significance for everyone watching. Kisses traveled deeper, piercing skin and touching the soul, leaving an indelible mark. Between surprise and bewilderment, the diners reacted with a mix of hushed murmurs and muffled gasps, while Grace stood frozen, caught between shock and confusion, her cheeks flushed and her trembling hands barely stayed at her sides. Victoria, her face burning with humiliation, shot them a fiery glare before storming off. "This isn't over," she shouted, her heels clicking loudly against the floor. As she made her way to the exit, the restaurant's patrons watched her leave, their gazes trailing her until the door swung shut behind her. When revenge is complete, the heart often finds itself in a cold, barren wasteland where victory feels more like isolation than justice. The next morning, just as the first light of dawn crept into the city, Lila Hart stood in the maintenance room. She was focused on organizing the cleaning supplies she'd need for the day, her hands working with practiced efficiency, yet her mind drifted, replaying the events of the previous night. The door was slightly ajar, letting in a sliver of soft morning light. Suddenly the sound of footsteps echoed behind her. Before she could turn around, she felt strong arms wrap around her with surprising steadiness. A bouquet of flowers appeared in front of her face, filling the air with a delicate fragrance. Instantly she recognized the familiar scent of the cologne she had noticed on more than one occasion. Her heart raced. She spun around, quickly coming face to face with Adrian Blackwelly's intense eyes filled with uncertainty seemed to search hers forenswers. "Mr. Ethan Grace," said her voice trembling. "Last night you didn't clarify anything. You made a promise." She choked on her words as she became aware of his proximity. Her heart pounded wildly, and even breathing became a conscious effort. Ethan tilted his head slightly, studying her with a mix of curiosity and something else she couldn't quite place. His tone was calm, almost playful. "Why so nervous?" "Grace, sir," she stammered, averting her gaze as a blush crept up her cheeks. Ethan smirked slightly, watching her intently. "Would you marry me in a week?" he asked suddenly, his words direct and unapologetic. Grace's eyes widened in shock. Her breath hitched as she struggled to process what she had just heard. "I don't understand, sir," she replied in a faint voice, stepping back as if to gain some clarity. "What are you talking about? Please be clear." Ethan placed a bouquet of flowers on a nearby table, keeping his gaze locked on her. "I know you felt it, Grace, just like I did with that kiss." She stared at him, her eyes shining with a mix of disbelief and restraint. Finally she spoke, her voice soft but filled with meaning. "A kiss given with the soul doesn't seek the surface. It searches for the truth in the other person. It's the silent language of what can never be said." Ethan smiled clearly, moved by her response, and took another step closer, narrowing the space between them even further. "I need your help. Help, Grace. I need you to marry me." She, however, stepped back, startled. Her heart was pounding fiercely. She tried to respond, but the words stuck in her throat. Taking a deep breath, she finally said in a calm but resolute tone, "Open your heart." "Sir," I promised to try to understand without judgment. Ethan gave her a faint, almost imperceptible sad smile, and began to speak, his voice laden with repressed emotion. "My fiancée, well, my ex-fan is an incredibly beautiful woman. Her face looks as if it was sculpted by angels, and her figure is enviable, almost unreal in its perfection. But just a week before our wedding, she betrayed me." The tears he had been holding back finally rolled down his cheeks. Grace watched him silently, feeling her heartache at his confession. "I'm so sorry, sir," she said gently, her voice filled with genuine compassion. "Could it have been a mistake?" "Are you sure?" Ethan shook his head, his jaw tightening at the memory. "I saw her, Grace. She was leaving a luxurious hotel in the arms of another man." And then his voice faltered as he continued, "I saw them kissing without shame." Grace looked down, clasping her hands together. Her voice came out as a whisper. "I'm truly sorry for all of this here, but how could I possibly help you?" Ethan swallowed deeply, attempting to soothe the tumultuous emotions within him. His voice grew firmer, but still held a trace of vulnerability. "Victoria is proud unbearably, so she cannot stand humiliation or disgrace. That's why last night at the restaurant, in front of everyone, I carried off the wedding." He hesitated, then continued, "And I pretended it was because of you to hurt her." Grace's head shot up, her eyes filled with shock and disappointment. She stepped back as though his words had physically struck her. "You used me for revenge?" she asked, at her tone wavering between disbelief and pain. "Did it not occur to you that I might not want to be part of such dark emotions? My soul has room only for light and honesty." Ethan was speechless for a moment, stunned by the intensity of her words. Finally he exhaled deeply and replied, his tone softer, almost admiring. "See, that's exactly why I chose you for this role." Grace frowned, her confusion evident. "I don't understand," she replied, her voice filled with uncertainty. Ethan looked at her, leaning closer, but careful not to invade her space. "It's the way you speak, the way you wear. There's something about you, Grace, something so beautiful, but I can't quite figure out what it is." A silence fell between them, but it wasn't awkward. It was as if words had been replaced by a deeper connection, something neither of them could articulate, yet both could feel. "Love is that everyday miracle," Ethan said softly, "that turned simple words into poetry and shared silences into home." He took a deep breath, his gaze affixed on Grace, equal parts puzzled and admiring, leaning in slightly. He tried to read her expression. "So Lila Hart, what do you say? Will you help me? Will you marry me?" I promise not to touch you, and after 7 days, you'll be free, that's all the time. I need to curb her arrogance and disloyalty. Grace stood still, her gaze lost somewhere on the floor as his words echoed. In her mind, finally, she answered in a calm yet resolute tone, I can't agree to a marriage for the wrong reasons, Mr. Ethan. He raised an eyebrow, clearly taken aback by her response. And what other reason besides attraction, interest, or revenge could justify a union? Grace lifted her head and met his eyes. There was a striking intensity in her gaze that left them momentarily unguarded. True love, Mr. Ethan, she said firmly. Her words hung in the air like an unexpected melody, leaving Ethan with an unfamiliar emptiness in his chest. He lowered his gaze briefly and murmured, then maybe I don't understand that other side of the soul. To his surprise, Grace gave a faint smile, one that seemed to carry a hint of pity. I'll help you, Mr. Ethan, she said, her voice steady, but I'll still be the cleaning girl. 7 days as you promised, not a single day more. Ethan tilted his head, puzzled by her answer. Would you help me if you don't believe in love built on contracts? Grace let out a brief, genuine "oh," followed by a small sigh. Oh, Mr. Ethan, you're not very perceptive when it comes to women. It's quite simple. I'm in love with you. Her confession landed like an unexpected blow, leaving Ethan momentarily speechless, his mind trying to process her words. The room settled into a silence heavy with meaning, neither of them knowing quite how to respond. Finally, Ethan nodded slowly and turned toward the door, his expression unreadable. We have a deal. Have a good day, Grace, he said, leaving the maintenance room without looking back behind him. He left an agreement uneven and fraught with possibilities. A bond born of her love and his desire for revenge and self-interest. Yet neither of them realized that within those days their initial reasons might begin to blur. Love built on convenience often creates walls instead of opening doors. The church glowed under the soft shimmer of chandeliers. White flowers adorned every corner, filling the air with a delicate fragrance that heightened the immense solemnity. The murmurs of the guests faded as the wedding march began to play, marking Lila Hart's entrance. She walked slowly, each step uncertain but determined, wrapped in a simple yet elegant wedding dress that highlighted her natural beauty. She moved with a mixture of nerves and resolve. The eyes of everyone in the room followed her, their expressions a blend of surprise and restrained admiration. Ethan stood at the altar, his face a mixture of unreadable emotions. His perfectly tailored black suit contrasted sharply with the subtle tremor in his hands, which he tried to conceal by clasping them tightly behind his back. His eyes were fixed on Grace, gazing at her with an intensity that betrayed far more feelings than he was ready to admit. As Grace reached the altar and took her place before Ethan, the two locked eyes in a profound silence, as though words were inadequate to capture the depth of their emotions. Ceremony moved forward until the Father Michael Donnelly solemnly declared, if anyone has any reason to object to this union, speak now, or forever hold your peace. A heavy silence fell over the church. Every face in the room seemed frozen, each breath held in anticipation. Suddenly the large church doors swung open. With a loud crash shattering the stillness, a striking figure strode in with deliberate steps, sharp click of her heels echoing like a heartbeat in the hushed air. Ethan. Cassandra Vale's voice cut through the quiet with urgency and defiance. Heads turned toward her as she advanced with her signature commanding presence. She wore an exquisite designer gown, every detail seemingly chosen to ensure no one could overshadow her. Stop this wedding, Victoria exclaimed, her gaze locked onto Ethan. I'm the one you love. Ethan, frozen like a statue, shifted his gaze from Grace to the uninvited guest. Grace inhaled deeply, her expression calm despite the slight tremble of her hands. The church was steeped in tense anticipation. The moment so charged it felt as though time itself had paused. Ethan remained motionless, caught between Victoria's words, laden with regret and desperation, and Grace's steady gaze holding an unspoken truth with quiet but unwavering intensity. The tension was palpable, the air thick with unspoken emotions. As everyone watched in silence, Victoria stepped closer, her poise contrasting with the tears streaking her face. Her voice, though trembling, carried the weight of a plea. Ethan, look at me. I have to confess I betrayed you. I made a mistake, but it happened only once. Her voice dropped to a whisper, yet it seemed to echo through every corner of the church. It was my ego, my insecurity. I thought I needed someone else's approval to feel complete, but I don't, Ethan. I only need you. You are Ruth, my home. Please give me another chance. Ethan's eyes narrowed as hesitated Victoria. There was a raw humanity in her confession, a vulnerability she rarely displayed, yet there stood Grace, silent but radiant, a presence that demanded nothing yet offered everything inside. Ethan wrestled with his thoughts. Two flowers bloom in my garden, he mused. One shines like the sun, captivating in its beauty, but full of thorns, I know too well. The other is modest and quiet, with deep roots that promise shade in times of drought. Choosing between them isn't about which more beautiful, it's about which breathes life into my soul. The Father Michael Donnelly, visibly uneasy, stepped back, recognizing this decision was far beyond his control. Grace drew a deep breath, her chest rising and falling in calm yet resolute rhythm, closing her eyes for a brief moment. She seemed to reach into the depths of her soul for the courage she needed, then lifting her gaze to Ethan, spoke with a voice that was soft but carried an undeniable weight, resonating through every corner of the church. Ethan, love isn't about holding on, it's about letting go. She paused briefly, and her tone shifted, becoming almost lyrical. My grandmother used to say, let what you love go free. If it returns, it was always yours. If it doesn't, it never truly was. Grace's words hovered in the air, delivering a truth that seemed to talk you through the silence. Perhaps the greatest act of love is letting go, allowing someone to find their path, even if that path doesn't include you. I'm letting you go. The church fell into a profound silence, as if the world itself had paused. Grace continued, her voice steady, there's no room for vengeance here, Ethan. It builds nothing of value. You need to choose from love, not pride. Don't cling to what should be or what others expect of you. Listen to your heart. If she is our truth, follow her. That is what your soul deserves. And mine too. Ethan stood frozen, her words cutting deep into a part of him he hadn't realized existed. His jaw tightened, his gaze shifting between Grace and Victoria. One embodied a chaotic but familiar passion, while the other offered a calm light, inviting him towards something unknown but filled with possibility. Victoria, standing in the center aisle, placed a hand over her heart, her eyes pleading as they locked onto Ethan. Please, Ethan, she whispered, you love me and I adore you. I promise I'll change. Grace remained still, her modest yet unwavering presence exuding a quiet strength. She had no more words to give, only her bare truth. Her eyes met Ethan's, not with reproach but with calm acceptance. And Ethan clenched his fist, closed his eyes for a moment, and took a deep breath. The choice before him wasn't merely about who to pick, it was a booth kind of man he wanted to be. Every guest in the church was tense, anticipating the decision that would shape not only this wedding, but also the lives of all those in attendance. Finally, Ethan turned to Victoria, his voice carrying a mixture of sadness and clarity. Victoria, you were the most beautiful garden my eyes ever beheld, but over time I realized your beauty was meant to be admired, not shared. Grace is different. Her beauty is like the earth, quiet, steady, and capable of sustaining life. Even in the hardest of times, my love for you came from what I saw, not what I felt. Today I understand I need more than reflections. I need depth, a root to nourish my life when everything external fades. I found that root in Grace, in her simple, genuine soul. It pains me to say goodbye to what I once dreamed of with you, but it would be a greater betrayal to deny what I feel. No tears streaming down her face, Victoria lowered her head and walked out of the church, leaving behind the echo of her heartbreak. Ethan watched her go for a moment before turning to the Father Michael Donnelly. Father, please continue with the ceremony, he said firmly. Grace looked at him, her expression a mix of disbelief and restrained emotion. When the moment came, the Father Michael Donnelly announced, you may kiss the bride. Ethan pulled Grace into his arms and kissed her with a passion that spoke not of possession, but of love and redemption. The wedding night would unveil a shocking revelation that would determine whether those 7 days of their marital contract would be extended or come to an abrupt And Ethan stepped over the threshold of his grand mansion carrying Grace in his arms, her bridal gown trailing gracefully behind. The sound of his footsteps echoed through the vast, elegant foyer. Grace, her cheeks faintly flush-edged, glanced up at him with a blend of amusement and nervous energy. This part wasn't in the contract terms. She murmured with a soft laugh. Ethan let out a small smile, gently setting her down. His eyes sparkled with a rare intensity. "So will we be sleeping in separate rooms?" he asked, his voice laced with curiosity. Avoiding his gaze, Grace hesitated for a brief moment before responding in a calm but serious tone. "About that, there's something I need to tell you." Ethan raised an eyebrow, intrigued, and stepped closer to her. "A secret?" He asked, his curiosity deepening. Grace drew in a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words before she let them out. "I am not as untouched as you might believe, Amen. He took my innocence." Her voice carried a delicate grace, wrapping her confession in an air of dignity. Ethan blinked, taken aback, yet an unexpected tenderness softened his face instead of judgment. "You have such a pure soul. I never would have guessed, but why would that matter to me?" he replied earnestly, revealing a surprisingly compassionate side. Grace smiled, a hint of sadness and mystery in her expression as she took Ethan's hands in hers. "You'll see why it matters. Give me a few minutes to change and everything will become clear." She stepped back, her voice steady. "Wait for him in your room, though." A flicker of unease stirred within him. Ethan nodded and ascended the grand staircase to his bedroom. The warm glow of the lamps bathed the room in a cozy light as Hess sat on the edge of the bed, replaying the whirlwind of events from the past few days. In his time seemed to elapse indefinitely until the sound of gentle footsteps hoed through the hall, drawing nearer. The door creaked open, and Grace stood in the doorway. Ethan's gaze froze, his eyes widened in astonishment as he took her in. Grace stepped into the room, her disguise utterly transforming her appearance. A shimmering two-piece adorned with sequins accentuated her figure, and her face was partially obscured by a delicate mask. It was a striking contrast to the modest cleaning uniform he had grown accustomed to seeing her wear. Her loose hair framed her face, which with the mask and red lips resembled something from a dream. "Is it really you?" he asked, his voice a mixture of disbelief and excitement. "Is it you?" Grace smiled shyly. Her eyes sparkled with courage and determination. "Yes, it's me. 5 years ago, I attended a masquerade ball at one of your high-profile events. It was for your foundation. That's when I first met you in person. I had already seen you on social media, and I fell for you." Ethan stepped closer, still trying to absorb her words. "I remember everything," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "You were the girl in the most stunning costume. I invited you to the terrace, and we went for a drive, but you never told me your name or took off your mask." Grace lowered her gaze for a moment before meeting his eyes again. "I thought if you knew who I really was, how little I had you'd reject me. So I loved you with all my heart that night, and then let you go. You know what they say, if you love someone, let them go." Ethan shook his head, deeply moved by her confession. "I never forgot that beautiful girl," he murmured. Grace took a step closer, lifting her gaze with the intensity she had carried for years. "It's met, Ethan. It's always been me," as though her words were filling a part of him that had been empty for far too long. The billionaire inhaled deeply. "Will you start a family with me?" he asked, his voice filled with raw sincerity. "We could begin tonight with our firstborn." Grace laughed softly, her cheeks flushed. But her answer came quickly and with conviction. "That will take more than the 7 days in the contract." Ethan grinned, his tone playful as he replied, "How about we use the rest of our lives to tear up those clauses?" She stepped closer, closing the gap between them, and whispered, "No more words." Their lips met in a passionate kiss, one filled with promises and redemption. That night didn't mark the end of a contract, but the beginning of a story where no agreements were needed, in love writing its own rules. If this film touches your heart, leave your mark with a like, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel to explore more meaningful stories with us. Share your feelings with us and tell us your own stories. Every word you share is a